So if you've made it this far into the course, first of all, kudos to you. We've taken a look at high poly modeling, low poly modeling, UV unwrapping, cutting in seams, making sure that we're adhering to good textile density, between UV shells, as well as optimizing our UV space. We've really done a whole bunch of stuff in a short period of time. So props to you for sticking through it. What I want to look at in this lesson is just prepping our model to be exported to Substance Painter or really any other applications, but this part in the pipeline, we're going to look at texturing and some of the gotchas that you're going to want to consider when you're exporting your 3D models to any other 3D software. So the first one is more specific to texture baking, and that's making sure that we adhered to that high poly, low poly suffix naming conventions. So as I come through my low polys, right, I've gone and made sure that they all have that underscore low suffix. And we also want to make sure that they don't have a space at the end of them. We don't want this blank space. So make sure that they are just underscore low, and then you hit enter with 0 blank space at the end. And same thing for our high poly. We have air cap high. We've also got our hub high and our rubber. And we want to make sure that the naming conventions, or the names I should say, before our underscored areas match both in the high and the low. We want to make sure that we have partners for each one of these models here. So that's going to be our first round of gotchas. The second round of gotchas that I want to take a look at is applying some, or at least adding some modifiers to our meshes here so that we have the appropriate geometry being exported with the correct shading. I'm going to come up and change it from texture to object so we can see the shading a little bit better. I'm also going to just remove the floor so we can kind of see that, we're not getting grids everywhere. And let's go and select our hub piece here. And the first modifier I want to add is going to be under Modify, Weighted Normal. And the change is going to be relatively subtle. And I also want to make sure that first and foremost, I check on this Keep Sharp option. We'll see that by default, if I zoom in, it's going to just override those. And we're going to get rid of that shading that we had worked for in one of the earlier lessons. So make sure that we select the Keep Sharp. And if I just turn this off and on, hopefully we can kind of see a little bit of a shading difference. But essentially what's going on here is it's calculating the face sizes of our mesh, and it's readjusting or reweighting the averaged normals based on the sizes of our faces here. So areas that have greater face sizes are getting more influence on the averaged normals, which is going to allow us to create a little bit better shading for this model with really no work whatsoever. The final thing I want to do is add a triangulate modifier on top, and we'll see that by default it's going to start to ruin that shading that we had created. But if I go and select the Keep Normals option, then we're going to be getting that normals that we got from this weighted normals modifier. Now the reason that we want to triangulate our mesh here is that at the end of the day, when we go ahead and export this from Blender, it's going to triangulate our mesh anyways. And really we have no control over how it triangulates it. And if I just go and quickly take a look at our model here, we can see that right now with this modifier based off of the method that we selected, it's going ahead and triangulating this face this way, and it's splitting it in half with a line right down here. Now, what might happen at the end of the day, and that's going to be all right for now, but if we go and export this again, say without this triangulate modifier, it might decide to triangulate this face this way, and I'll redraw that face a little straighter there. It might decide to triangulate it this way. And while that might seem pretty innocuous on its own right now, there is the possibility that that minor difference could wreak havoc on how your mesh actually starts displaying textures once we bring this into a game engine per se. So we want to make sure that when we export our model, specifically our low poly, we want to triangulate it so that we have a consistent triangulation method for these faces so that it's going to consistently read our texture data wherever we decide to export this. And we don't want Blender to just decide to, triangulate it one way, and the next time we export it, triangulate it a different way after we've created a bunch of textures for this. It's going to be very, very painful if that's the case. Mostly emotionally, but I'm sure there could be some physical pain involved too if you really try hard enough. So I'm going to repeat this process for these other two pieces. And what I'm actually going to do, like we've seen before, is copy our modifiers here onto these other pieces. So what I'll do is select our air cap and our tread, and then finally shift select the piece that we want to copy our modifiers from. And instead of going and selecting copy to selected, another quick way we can copy all of the modifiers is if I hit Control and L to bring up the link transfer data menu, and I want to copy modifiers. So now when I do that, it's going to copy the modifiers that we have to both of these models down here. And if I take off our wireframe actually and just take a look, that's going to look pretty good. So that's going to be it for the gotchas section. Now let's take a look at exporting this so we can bring it into Substance Painter. So what I want to do is select all of our objects here, being our 3 low poly objects. I'm going to hit F4 to do export, or we can also come up to File and Export. And we can select the FBX. Now you're free to select any other file format that you want depending on your project, but if you just want to follow along, take a look at selecting FBX. So once it brings up our dialog here, we're going to want to take a look at our export settings to make sure that Blender is exporting the correct data in the orientation and format that we want it. So the first option I want to select is under Include, and I want to limit it to just selected objects. So we're only exporting these 3 meshes here. We're not exporting anything from our Blender scene. And I'm just going to select Mesh because in this instance, we're only exporting meshes. So I don't want it to accidentally export our lattice or maybe our curve because we don't really need that at the end of the day. Now I'm going to just leave this transform information as default because if I believe correctly, I think Substance Painter does use the Y up coordinate system. So for texturing, we're going to just leave that as is. And once we bring this to Unreal, we'll take a look at how we can reorient this on import. I'm also going to open up the geometry and change the smoothing to face. So this is going to allow us to mitigate a bit of a warning that Unreal brings up later on about smoothing and smoothing groups. And then I want to make sure that we have apply modifiers enabled. And that's what's going to allow us to export our meshes with these modifiers on them so that we don't actually have to apply these in Blender. We can just export our model. It's going to apply those on export or this FBX that we're creating. So we never actually have to apply these modifiers in a destructive way when we're working in Blender. Say we wanted to make some changes later on, we don't actually have to commit to anything. We can just have Blender do it on export. And then finally, I'm just going to uncheck bake animation. With the armature and bake animation, we don't have any of this stuff in our low poly, but I just make sure that it's disabled so that we can guarantee it's not coming in with any animation. And once we've got this set up, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and click on the little add button, give it a name like Good FBX Export. And once you hit OK, what will happen is it will add a bunch of different operator presets so that you never have to take a look at setting these up again if you didn't want to. So once we have that all set up, what I would like to do is I'm going to name this tire_low. Again, because this is our low poly, we want to provide it with the _low suffix. And then we can go and export this where we want. And once we've done that for our low poly, let's go ahead and just repeat that process for our high poly here. Make sure I'll select all these. Again, selecting everything. I'll select our tire tread just as the active selection. And again, this time we've got all of our settings set up for us because we previously exported the low. Let's go and just change the name to underscore high, and we can export this as well. And finally, once we have all of our high poly and low poly assets exported, let's go ahead and jump over to Substance Painter to see how we can import these. And so over here in Substance Painter, let's go up to File and New. And this is going to be the start of our new project. So under File, let's go and hit Select. And we're going to want to select the low or game ready version of this asset. We're going to be selecting the high poly later. So let's just go and select tire underscore low. And for our template option here, I'm going to use the PBR metallic roughness by default. And that probably will be your default template because that's the kind of texture workflow we're going to work in. Now for document resolution, I'm going to work in 2K, but again, you can work in any resolution you want depending on what your needs are. And then I'm also going to select the DirectX version for the normal map format. Now this is going to cause a little bit of issue in the next sections because while Unreal Engine uses DirectX, Blender uses OpenGL. So it's going to cause a little bit of confusion in the software. But if your intention is to only use Blender and you're not interested in bringing this in as a game model to Unreal Engine, go ahead and select OpenGL. So once we've got that all set up, we can go ahead and hit OK. And that's going to bring in our low poly game asset. So in the next video, we'll look at how we can extract that high poly detail and display it on our low poly asset here in Substance Painter.